you'll be able to see at the top left corner we are getting almost 100 FPS while emulating Pokemon Sword on a Mali GPU Android device. Yo, what's up guys, it's ApTreX here. In today's video we'll be comparing the Uzuy MMJR emulator along with the Pine Nintendo Switch emulator for Android. For today's video I have brought out my Redmi K50i with MediaTek processor and a Mali GPU. So I won't be comparing these emulator on my high-end device because it doesn't make sense. Most of you guys have mid-range to low-end Android devices, so I want to give you the best representation of Nintendo Switch emulation on at least Mali's GPU Android devices. With that being said, let's get started. So this device has about 5.4 GB of RAM, and as you will be able to see, I have already set up Pine emulator. We also did a testing video on this specific Android device few videos back, and you guys already know it provided really amazing and surprising performance. But is it better than Uzuy MMJR? Let's find out. Now to start off, let me show you guys the best settings that we'll be using. First of all, it is for Uzuy MMJR emulator. So limit speed percentage has been turned on, enable synchronized core speed, usage mode should be set to aggressive, shader backend should be GLSL, NVDEC emulation can be none or GPU, ASTC decoding mode is set to GPU, recompression method is set to low quality, resolution you can go all the way up to 0.125x resolution inside the newest build of Uzuy MMJR. So that's what we'll be doing in today's video. Optimized SPIRV output has been turned on to always. Asynchronous shader cache, disk shader cache, and force maximum clocks have been turned on. And in terms of debug graphics, you'll be able to see Vulkan API is being used along with native code execution as CPU backend. Not just that, but we are also using the ARM Mali G710 MP7 Mali graphics driver, because Uzuy MMJR lets you import custom graphics driver on even Mali GPU Android devices. Now let's go back to Pine emulator and let me show you guys the settings here. So I'll scroll down and you can copy these settings for yourself. Dock mode should be turned off. Afterwards, CPU backend native code execution. Fast JIT mem has been disabled. Force triple buffering, disable frame throttling. Afterwards, force maximum GPU clocks is not supported on Mali GPU Android devices. Enable dynamic resolution has also been turned off. Fast GPU readback and writes have been turned on, and those are the best settings for Pine emulator on Mali GPU Android devices. So let's start off by testing out One Piece Unlimited World Thread inside the Pine emulator on a Mali GPU Android device and see if it works or will it just crash. So I'll just go ahead and tap on the start game, and at the top left corner you'll also be able to see the FPS that we are getting. It is super crazy. We are exceeding 200 plus FPS on a Mali GPU Android device. It seems completely fake because this number of FPS is just unreasonable. Even on Snapdragon processor Android device you don't get this great of an FPS. But there we go, the game has successfully started and we are noticing no graphical issues. It is running at straight up 130 FPS, which is mind blowing. 120 FPS while emulating a 3D open world Nintendo Switch game on our Android devices, especially a Mali GPU Android device, is very worth it. Anyways, that was One Piece World Red. Let's move on towards our next game, which is going to be Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, and see how well does this game work. I'll be testing out all these same games inside the Uzuy MMJR later on, so be sure to watch the full video. And if you guys are new here, hit that like button, subscribe, turn on all notification, as it brings similar interesting videos on my channel. Anyways, as you will be able to see, we are just getting a black screen with 0 FPS at the top left corner, so I think this game does not work on a Mali GPU Android device, at least inside of the Pine emulator. So we'll simply tap on the close game and then tap on the OK button. Let's start off by testing out new games like Pokemon Legends Arceus. Afterwards, we'll try out Pokemon Sword, which is going to be very amazing. So yeah, Pokemon Legends Arceus, will it work on a Mali GPU Android device? Let's press A to start the game and see if it loads or not. If it loads, that is very surprising, but if it doesn't load, then that is pretty expected because this device only has 6 GB of RAM. So as you will be able to see, the game has crashed, and I think it's because of the insufficient RAM. So let's move on towards our next game, which is going to be Pokemon Sword. So this will give you a direct benchmark of which games can be played on your Mali GPU Android device. Well, I am not testing all of the games, but most of the popular titles is what I'll test, and you will be able to notice there are some stuttering and frame skipping issues, but after we wait for a few seconds and after the shaders are loaded, you will be able to see at the top left corner we are getting almost 100 FPS while emulating Pokemon Sword on a Mali GPU Android device. Anyways, let's exit the house and you will see the real FPS that we'll get. Even in outside world scenarios, you get around 30 to 40 FPS, so it should be completely playable experience. And sometimes your games might freeze or you might think that it has frozen, but if you wait for a few seconds, you will go back to the game, and at the top left corner, take a look at this. 50 FPS, almost 60 FPS in open world areas inside Pokemon Sword on a Mali GPU Android device. Even some Snapdragon processors can't get this. So yeah, we'll just go ahead and tap on the close game option and let's try out Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. This is going to be our last game which we'll test out inside the Pine emulator, and I'm 99% sure that this will work with amazing frame rate because we have already tested it out previously in my videos. So yeah, there we go, Let's Go Pikachu has successfully started, and let's find out what's the FPS in outside world areas. So it will be pretty interesting to see how well do they work, and take a look at this. Again, same stuttering issue for a little bit, and once the shaders are compiled it is super smooth. Like just take a look at this, we are also getting almost 90 FPS while emulating Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu on a Mali GPU Android device. Pine emulator gives you the best performance, or does it? Let's find that out by removing Pine emulator from the recents and testing out the Uzuy Android build. So this is the overclocked build of Uzuy emulator. Let's start with One Piece Unlimited World Red and see if this game works inside this emulator or not. And there we go, the first crashing issue which we just encountered. No, this game doesn't open on a Mali GPU Android devices, and as you know, the original emulator which Uzuy is based on should be more compatible with all titles, but unfortunately it has zero Mali GPU support, and that's why even Skyline emulator folks like Pine emulator can easily beat it in terms of performance. The next game which we are trying out is going to be Pokemon Brilliant Diamond, and once again at the top left corner you'll be able to see we are getting 0 FPS. Alright, there we go, Pokemon Brilliant Diamond has successfully started. So yep, it does work inside the Uzuy MMJ emulator, and it did not work inside the Pine emulator. So that's definitely a pros. But just take a look at this, we are emulating it at 0.125x resolution, and that's why at the top left corner you'll notice that we are getting almost 51 FPS, but the graphics are absolutely horrendous. So you don't really need to use the lowest graphics quality available to get the best amount of FPS. Let's increase the graphical output to the Skyline level, which is definitely 1x graphics, but for today's video we'll go with 0.5x graphics. That should be enough for low-end Android devices. Let's try out our next game, which will be Pokemon Legends Arceus. It did not work on Pine emulator, so will it work on Uzuy MMJ? I doubt it. Yeah, there we go, the game just crashed. So no, Legends Arceus also does not work. The next game that we'll try out is Pokemon Sword, and don't forget that we are using custom driver, and from what I am noticing, there we go, Pokemon Sword also crashed. So Pine emulator has more compatibility of games on Mali GPU Android devices compared to such big project like Uzuy MMJR or even the original Yuzu emulator. They did not add Mali GPU support, whereas the developers of Skyline implemented a basic level of Mali GPU support. Only few basic games like Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu or few Naruto games can be played inside of the Uzuy MMJR on a Mali GPU Android device, and I think Pokemon Sword can run if you have like 8 to 12 GB of RAM on your MediaTek processor Android device. But there we go, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu managed to start, and we are getting around 36 FPS, which is not that bad at all. But again, it's not 100 FPS guys, it's not 90, 60, 70 FPS which we were getting inside of the Pine emulator, but the graphics definitely seem better than that of the Pine emulator, and there can be some stuttering issues, as you will be able to see the FPS has dropped down to 9.5. So which is the best Nintendo Switch emulator for Mali GPU Android devices? The answer is simple, go with the Pine Nintendo Switch emulator. Let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think about this comparison. I'll see you guys next time though. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.